Buddha taught so many varieties of teachings. We term it as Buddha taught more than 84,000 teachings. For the ease of understanding, if we categorize the teachings of the Buddha, it can be categorized as teachings that is aimed to defeat. I think defeat is the right word. The teachings that are aimed to defeat non-virtuous thoughts and actions. So we have that kind of teachings. And in that section of teachings, we will hear lots of teachings such as karma, rebirth, virtue, non-virtue, to the certain extent, we will also hear teachings such as Four Noble Truths. Then there's a teachings that are aimed to defeat clinging to the notion of self. There Buddha taught teachings such as what we now call prajna paramita. There you will find terms such as shunyata, emptiness, selflessness, egolessness, so on and so forth. Then there's a third category of the teachings that are specially aimed to defeat all views, including the view of emptiness. And this is considered one of the most important. This sort of section or the category of the teachings are considered quite important. Now, it's important for me to present this way. First of all, the present Shastra, for those who are new, is based. Shastra is like a commentary. The present text that we are going through is a commentary to. Generally, of course, it is a commentary to all the teachings of the Buddha, all different aspects, but it's mainly the commentary to the second category, where Buddha taught the egolessness, selflessness. So therefore you will find words like prajna paramita, shunyata, etc. Now again, I have to sort of make it slightly academical here. If you were to ask which of these three are more important or more valid, it's very difficult to answer. Although the scholars, both in India and Tibet, have endless argument defining which category of the teachings are what we call expedient teaching, and which categories are what we call direct teachings. Teachings that does not require interpretation. Where Buddha taught seemingly existence of hell realm, 6 realms, virtue, non-virtue, do the good things, avoid non-virtuous things, so on and so forth, are generally categorized as the teachings that require expedient, teachings that require interpretation. Meaning that Buddha, out of his compassion, it's not like, To a certain extent, the concepts such as emptiness, very similar to concepts such as emptiness, you will find in, I'm just giving you this as an example, like in the Western philosophy looks like Nietzsche, for instance. But if you go to Nietzsche's, he will be talking about whatever his principal philosophy has been. He would not have a specific path for someone who may not necessarily have that kind of capacity, but who still has the suffering, who still wants to get rid of the suffering, who wants to have the path to get rid of the suffering. Nietzsche may not have answered to that kind of audience. Buddha, on the other hand, has taught to all types of sentient beings. In fact, there's even an account about Buddha teaching to a butcher who said that since this is his livelihood, he cannot take the vow of not killing. So Buddha taught him to take a vow of not killing after the sunset till the sunrise. Of course, this is not to be interpreted as the Buddha allowing the butcher to kill. Somehow the butcher has to begin a virtuous path. He has to begin a spiritual path. And this is the only capacity that the butcher at that time happened to have. Buddha, out of his compassion, cannot be rejected the wish to follow a path, yet because of the consequences he cannot take a vow of pratimoksha, or not harming the others. So Buddha gave him this kind of prescriptions, like not to kill beings after the sunset till sunrise. This kind of teachings are what we call drangdan in Tibetan, which is expedient teachings that requires interpretation. I'm trying to cap some of the questions that are raised yesterday, which are quite important questions. And the chapters that we are going through at the moment, of course, is very important from the mind training point of view. But as far as understanding the shlokas may not be that difficult. So I'm going to dwell, while we have the time, I'm going to dwell more on the approaching to the 9th chapter, if you like. Therefore, try to really give you sort of the overall idea of the Buddha's teachings. So, yes, like reincarnation. When Buddha talked about his past life, there are sutras such as Jatakamala Sutra, where he talked about past life. And that is again teachings that requires interpretations. But as I said earlier, scholars both in India and in Tibet, as the teachings gets more deeper and profound, there is very sophisticated debate or argument regarding what is expedient or not. Okay, so for instance, the classic four seal, which are all compounded things are impermanent, all defiled emotions are pain, everything has no inherently existing nature, nirvana is beyond extreme. These four are considered like almost like a hallmark, well, from the Mahayana point of view. This four hallmark, you can divide into two categories. All compounded things are impermanent. That teaching actually is the expedient teaching. It requires interpretation. Meaning that if that teaching is taken as the ultimate teaching, then there is an assertion that there is something to be impermanent. So only the later two, that all things does not have inherently existing nature, nirvana is beyond extreme, these are what we call teachings that does not require interpretation. Now, 4 hallmark is considered really, really one of the most important, significant sort of trademark, or if you like, hallmark. But there are again sutras like Mahaparinirvana Sutra or Lanka-Avatara Sutra, where Buddha actually told to a monk, if a follower of the Buddha believe all compounded things are impermanent, all negative emotions, or all emotions, or defiled emotions are pain, things does not all phenomena has no inherently existing nature, nirvana is beyond extreme. If a monk, a follower of the Buddha, believes that as a ultimate valid truth, then Buddha said it is equally like if you look at a pile of garbage and think that this pile of garbage is jewel. So from this point of view, what happens to be the direct teaching, the teaching that does not require interpretation, often becomes teaching that actually expedient teaching. So this is a very big subject. Even in India, I was talking about 3 categories of teachings. There's a teachings that is mainly to defeat the non-virtue, and then the teaching to defeat the self-clinging, and then the teaching that defeats the all kinds of view. You can sort of, I'm generalizing this, kind of dangerously generalizing this. You can say that follower of the characteristic less, or the egolessness, or the shunyata teaching, there are a lot of followers of those who are attracted to that teaching, and that teaching became almost institutionalized, so to speak. And here we have figures like Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, and that teaching became very, very popular in Tibet, which till today we study as a label as a Madhyamika philosophy. Then there is teaching, the third category teaching, where Buddha taught as a means to defeat all view, where Buddha taught Tathagata Garbha, Buddha nature, for instance. There, this teaching became again popular among other groups. In India, you can say figures like Asanga, probably Dingnaga, Dharmakirti, and that teaching can, I think, safely say flourished in other parts of Asia, such as China, India, Japan, Korea. And even within Tibetan philosophical system, you will find a lot of leniency at times towards the second category, at times to the third category. There's not so much debate as far as the first category is concerned. This Shastra is, as I said, mainly commentary to the second category. So this is a teaching, this is a commentary commentating on prajna paramita, basically prajna paramita. Now, prajna is very difficult to define. At glance, when we talk about a prajna, we have no choice but to think in terms of something subjective, or cognizant. But prajna has to be free from dualistic distinctions of subject and object. Anything that is bound by the subject and object is not prajna in the Mahayana. So, for this reason, we use the word paramita. I think it has something to do with like gone beyond, transcending. So we are talking about transcending the subject and object. This is a difficult one because our mind just cannot fathom a territory that is not subjective and objective. It's just because there's no tool, as we talked yesterday. There's no tool. I think last year I was talking about how to explain to someone who has never tasted salt in entire life. How do you explain to this person how the salt tastes? You can only give this person sugar, some sweets, and say, this is not it. You can only establish the taste of salt by giving something opposite and negate that. That's probably the only thing that is possibly, humanly possible to do. Now, it's not as if, again, you must remember, it's not as if this prajna is not, attainable or achievable or recognizable. It's not. But the method such as hearing, contemplation, is very important. That's the only way for now. But we have to remember that this will only do a very vague, mediocre job to understand that prajna. So how do you really understand this prajna? How do you really actualize the prajna? Now this is, Buddha himself said, only one who is devoted. So we then come all the way back to devotion. The next to the devotion is hearing, contemplation, and of course meditation. Meditation does help us to understand what is not prajna. I mean that happens even from the foundation level. For instance, if your meditation instructor teaches you how to do shamatha, for instance. Shamatha instruction usually involves in like, okay, you sit straight, breathe normal, concentrate on your breathing, nothing else. As soon as you get distracted, go back to the breathing, so on and so forth. Now this is a very big trick. This is one of the most sophisticated trick. I call it a trick because we know very well that when you try to concentrate on your breathing in and out, the first thing you will experience is that you cannot, that you are not able to concentrate on your breathing. And that is an achievement. That is much better achievement than you imagining that you can actually concentrate on your breathing. Thinking that you cannot, thinking that you are really not able to concentrate is really a big achievement for a meditator. That your mind is... See, so based on that view, even the emptiness meditation, so-called emptiness meditation, by doing the emptiness meditation, you end up recognizing and noticing dualistic fixations, dualistic engrossment. And more you get, more you are aware of dualistic distinctions, weaker the dualistic distinctions and weaker the dualistic engrossment becomes. So then, as you progress, as soon as a judgmental mind comes or a fixation comes, almost simultaneously, the watcher, the noticer, the cognizant mind comes, and it makes a big dent on judgment, fixation, which normally would entangle you and get you involved with all the karmic formation and then give you the result of the samsara. But then it keeps on denting, keeps on derailing the flow of dualistic distinctions. As the dualistic distinctions begins to subside and evaporate, or basically, if you like, disappear, then a mind that is prajna, that has got nothing to do with the subject and object, that has got nothing to do with entanglement, appears. But you see, right now, from the dualistic point of view, we cannot fathom this one. Even if we try to fathom, you may end up thinking that such kind of state of consciousness has to be so boring because there's no dualistic engagement. We need excitement. We need to be entertained. We need to be suspicious. We need to be surprised. Otherwise, where is the fun? Where is the entertainment? So, many times when we talk about enlightenment at this stage, we are basically talking about more happier samsara, so to speak, more sort of better form of a samsara. We cannot, if we can even have a glimpse of what is enlightenment, it has to be the most disappointing place from the emotional point of view. It is the most boring place from the emotional point of view. There's no, I always say this, how do you watch a suspense thriller? Because you already know the end. You cannot get hooked onto any stories. There's no past, there's no future, there's no time, there's no space, so on and so forth. But I'm trying to give you the idea of what we call prajna. From the practical point of view, prajna is a mind that understands the truth. Okay, this is the best way I can put it. Mind that has the cognition of the truth. When you have that, your perception is not defiled. So this is what is being established here in the 9th chapter. Now in the other chapters, from the chapter 1 to 8, it's all about mind training. And why we do mind training? Because we have, as I said yesterday, we have habit. Habit, and when we talk about habit, we are talking about habit that is concealing the prajna, the truth. And we have so many habits. The most subtle habit is the constant distractions, constant entanglement. But then also, to make it more comprehensible, we, such as Lord Maitreya, categorize habits into many different categories. I mean, we have like we have labels like desire, anger, jealousy, pride, doubt. All these are basically a distraction. They are different form of distractions. Anger is a distraction. Jealousy is a distraction. Fundamental, they are sort of the main component of all these emotions is basically a distraction. And what is a distraction? Distraction is basically completely a mind that is completely lost into what, like completely spaced out, completely occupied, completely worked up. When you are jealous, you are worked up. When you are angry, you are totally worked up. You are occupied, you are entangled, you are bound, you are busy. So, chances to see the truth, non-existent. But this level of understanding the emotion is difficult. So, like Lord Maitreya has categorized the distractions in a much more sort of tangible way. Like he said, there are many different kinds of habit that is concealing the truth, such as the 6 different categories of habit, like ten la tse dang marung pa la tse, kuntuk la tse, bhame pa la tse, yurji, jewang ju la tse, lokpa ngambar shen la tse ba. There is habit of collecting, saving. That's a habit. Like a, what do you call it? Pack rat? Collecting. Human beings have this collecting habit, saving. No, we are not only talking about saving, collecting stamps or collecting cars, but we are talking just basically a human habit. Has one part of the human habit is collecting, saving. This kind of mind stream, saving, collecting, conceals the truth. So, obviously, to counter that, we have the practice of generosity. I'm trying to explain why Buddhist emptiness and Nietzsche's path is different. I'm trying to explain to you why shunyata, why the believer of the shunyata, follower of the shunyata can do prostration and it's not a contradiction. I'm trying to explain why a believer or the follower of the path of shunyata can talk about reincarnation. And in fact, why? See, if, like we talked yesterday, if relatively, if you assert that reincarnation does not exist, then you have a big problem. then your path will become very, very lopsided. This is why Nagarjuna and both Aryadeva said again and again, those who can accept shunyata, everything is acceptable. You understand? Because one would think, okay, the Buddhists are believer of shunyata. No need marigold, no need incense, no need reincarnation, no need all of that. But it's very, very unfair, especially these days. Many Buddhists in the West especially, among the Buddhist methods, I have a feeling that the modern people have this cherry-picking habit. I should include actually this as the seventh habit, cherry-picking, modern cherry-picking habit. So these modern people, especially in the West, they come to Buddhism and then they sort of go through the list of the Buddhism. Okay, reincarnation, oh, that's a Tibetan stuff, get rid of that. Okay, lotus, oh, that's Indian stuff, get rid of that. So they go through all of that. Anything that doesn't seem to, that seem to be sort of culturally unchewable, they sort of get rid of that as restricted by some other culture. But meditation now, that yoga, meditation, vegetarian, vegetable, aromatherapy, all that kind of works with your psyche, with your sort of way of thinking. So then you cherry pick. So what I'm saying is, if you believe that meditation can do the job in establishing a path, so should the belief in reincarnation, so should the marigold, so should the statue of the Buddha, because these are relative method and you cannot reject these. So remember, this is the motto that we always learn in the Buddhist philosophy. No underestimating in the relative truth, and no exaggeration in the ultimate. If you exaggerate in the ultimate level, philosophy has a fault. If you underestimate in the relative truth, your path has a fault. Your philosophy has a fault. Okay, so if I just go through the Maitreya's habit, the other habit is we all wishes, as much as we talk about, we talk about morality, and as much as we love, as much as we are those who don't like when somebody sort of break the rule in front of you, like, I don't know, let's say crossing a red light or jumping the queue. We have that kind of, you have to obey the rule. You have to, to be ethical. As much as we have that side with us, but underneath there is also that we love to be immoral. That is one of the habit we have. We just love to be immoral. That's one of the hobby. If you are not, especially if you are not caught or not, if there's nobody, if there's nobody watching, then tendency to break the rule, tendency to jump the queue, I don't know, that is very much there. You understand that marungparatse, meaning love to be immoral, is there. In order to defeat that, the method of discipline, the paramita of discipline is taught. So this is really important. I need to really clarify this, because Buddhist path is really not a survival kit for a group of tribe okay, this is what you should be doing. If somebody steals from your house, this is how you should punish. It's got nothing to do with this. Six paramita. Okay, of course, in general, if I'm speaking to a large group of peasants or, people who are more emotionally involved with Buddhism, of course, I would be speaking like, you should be generous so that, generosity is, so that generosity will make you prosperous. You should be disciplined because the discipline is like, it will bring you peace, so on and so forth. You have to make it theistic sound. But each and every aspect of these practices, such as 6 paramita, has another reason why they are there. The main reason is to unveil the veil that is sealing that is concealing the truth. Remember? The truth, the non-dualistic truth. Then we are aggressive. That's another habit we have. Okay, maybe outright we are not that violent, we kind of smile, all of that, but assertiveness, making a point, and to really, even existence of a calendar is a sign of aggression. Even a watch is an aggression, because it really, okay, Saturday, this is Saturday, this is what we should do. There's some sort of a fixed phenomena here and everywhere, you understand? So there is a fundamental love. Fundamentally, we love to be aggressive. It's considered efficient, by the way, to have a bit of aggression. So to combat that, we have the patience, because that kind of love for aggression again conceals the truth. Then how should I translate? Okay, usually we cherish the idea of being careful. Be careful, watch out, being careful. But actually, inside, we don't like to be careful. To be careful is a burden. Actually, we love, there's a love for couldn't carelessness. You understand? There's a love for not wanting to be careful. To be careful is a burden. It's a pain in the neck. So, just being lethargic, couldn't care less, lazy, I guess. Love for laziness. Love for laziness. Even though we like to believe that we are someone who works hard, but there is a underneath love for laziness. So to combat that habit, we have the diligence. And then the next one is yulji jemang julatse. This is kind of important. As much as we believe that we love independent. We want, the rights, independent. I like to do whatever I like. I'm my own boss. You are your own boss. As much as we think like this intellectually, but deep down, We all want to have our own Kim Jong-un. We all want to have our own dictator somewhere. It doesn't matter, the whole, for instance, why we want to even have a friend. Why is everybody sniffing for a friend? Why are everybody looking for a relationship? Now, quest for a relationship is you are looking for a Kim Jong-un. You are looking for, you love to be controlled. You love this kind of, because it is, you feel that it's easier. You feel that you are being taken care of by someone. Being taken care of. So, love for that kind of, dictator. Not only a person, by the way, conditions also. We love to be overpowered by circumstances, situations. That's how all the addiction starts. So, in order to combat that, we have samadhi, or one-pointedness, concentration. And then, lastly, there's so many categories like that. This is Maitreya's category of why there's 6 paramitas. There's a love or inclination to wrong view. We love to have wrong view. It comes under the banner of being critical, skepticism, but also on the other hand, blind belief. But basically, maybe to the certain extent we accept karma, we accept consequences of cause and condition, but deep inside, even the follower of philosophy of karma, philosophy of cause and condition and effect, deep inside there is tendency to want to believe in Almighty Creator, for instance. There's one, or the opposite. There's a tendency to believe in nothing exists. No God, no cause and conditions that are not obvious. So this is how path the Buddhist methods taught, or there's all these methods exist as a means to unveil this veil. If to put it another way, so we have, our aim is to really actualize the prajna, the truth, the absolute truth, the non-dualistic truth. Non-dualistic mind is what we need to actualize. So then we scan and try to see what is the immediate obscurations or the distractions that is distracting us from this truth. We then realize it's mainly the first obvious and the first gross obscurations or the distractions that we have is our body, our belonging, household, So in order to combat that, generosity, the paramita of generosity is taught and practiced first. Then paramita means something like gone beyond. This practice of generosity will transcend you, or at least set up the condition to transcend you from household, or not just household, gross samsaric existence. Yeah. So for that, actually, not only the generosity, but generosity and discipline is taught. And then, even though generosity and discipline can begin to transcend you from gross samsaric existence, there is still a danger that you can go back to the old habit. To give you an example, in the process of practicing generosity and discipline, you will encounter a lot of people. Among these people, some of these might discourage you, like the Dingnaga situation. Some of this, there are many different beings, and many of the beings, all these beings have their own weakness. They can tire you, they can discourage you, they can disappoint you, and with this reason, you may give up the path of transcending from samsara. Also, as you dwell in the path of generosity and discipline, when the path becomes so long-winded, and when you don't see any progress, and yet so many obstacles, the path dweller can get disheartened, discouraged. So for this, to combat that, we have the practice of patience and practice of diligence. And to hold the path of transcending from the samsara intact and maintain this path of transcending from the samsara at all time is samadhi and wisdom. So this is why how should I put it? All the verses that you have been hearing in the chapters yesterday and also will hear today, they are really not just a code of conduct or that is taught to a specific monastery, but actually it is a systematic, carefully designed method to overcome or to get rid of this deception that is deceiving us to see the truth. So, what I want to say is that we have to really learn to appreciate all these relative practices, such as generosity, such as even, like remember the advices yesterday, seemingly very, very trivial and meager advice like not to cut grass, how to rest, and then today you will find more like how to communicate with others. Of course, Śāntideva is not saying that is the only way, but these relative practices cannot be ignored. And not only the relative method, even the ultimate method, such as, I think this I have already said a little bit, Shunyata and the Tathagata Garbha, depending on what kind of path dweller you are, you may not necessarily accept the Shunyata, and for this kind of person, probably the idea of Tathagata Garbha, Buddha nature, is more suitable. Vice versa. So, having said all of this, if I may continue with some of the stanzas. We are somewhere in the middle of the 5th chapter. Always be respectful, humble, and generous when you relate to others. Fear of wrongdoing and the shame is like indispensable quality for the young Bodhisattva when the young Bodhisattva interacts with others. When a young Bodhisattva encounters dispute among others, remembering the futility of the samsara and remembering how these sentient beings are overpowered by their own emotion, instead of getting disappointed or even losing your temper, generate love and compassion and have empathy, just as when you look at somebody who has no control over his own life. And then Śāntideva has a series of how we should not be attached to our body. Now, as I said, this is all very elaborated vipassana instruction. Body and the mind has a strong connection. We are attached to our body, and the attachment to our body leads us to all sorts of entanglement. So here Śāntideva has several shlokas starting with why do you mind? He's addressing to the mind as a first person, like why you mind. guard this body. When this body one day will separate from you and get torn apart and dragged here and there by the vultures. And why do you now guard this body that will eventually go away from you anyway? Why do you have to guard this now wholeheartedly? Why do you mind guard this body since the body is not you, since the mind and the body is separate? This is a classic Mahayana teachings. These are some of the points that differs from the Vajrayana. Why you have to protect this body that is so dirty when you can protect a body that is made out of wood, something that is cleaner, so on and so forth. So why not separate this body with your mind, beginning with peeling this skin and going through flesh, bones with your intellect, and again looking at the parts of the body and trying to see what is the essential thing that this body possesses. Again and again, as you analyze, you will realize there's nothing essential. Yet, we have the habit of protecting this body wholeheartedly. Contemplate on this. You cannot eat these fishes. You cannot drink blood. You cannot suck intestines. What is the purpose of this body for you? On the other hand, you can think that you are protecting this body so that it can become a food for animals. So here, remember that this body can be used as a servant. Even though you protect this body wholeheartedly now, one day the Lord of the Mara, Lord of the Death, without any compassion or without any caring, will rob you from this body, rob your body and give it to the animals. At that point, oh you mind, what can you do? The servants whom you cannot order around, in mundane world, we have the habit of not rewarding them. This body that is merely our servant, even though we may feed them and clothe them for all this time, it is certain that this body will leave you. Yet, why do we go through all this hardship in feeding and taking care of this body? Now it is time to make this body serve you, giving a meager wage. Let us use this body as a boat so that you can use this to benefit all sentient beings. If you do that, you have transformed this dirty, futile body into precious human body. Having so, always keep a smile, avoid sitting on the throne carelessly, noisily. Do not open the door wildly. At all times be humble and be quiet like a cat or like a thief. As you can see, these cats and thieves can accomplish what they want through that kind of manner. Likewise, again, this is specific advice to the monks. The young bodhisattvas could accomplish a lot of good deeds through this kind of active action. Okay, we take a break.